right. Welcome, everybody, to Eat, Greet, and Succeed. If you're here, it means you're ready to up your game in the art of business etiquette. Or you're here because you've had the moment of panic during a business meal, thinking, uh-oh, which fork do I use for this salad? So don't worry, we've got you covered today. Tonight, we'll unwrap mystery of table manners, networking finesse, and how to leave a lasting positive impression. To set the tone, I'll start with a quote by Emily Post. Yes, the guru of all things table manners, right? And one of her greatest quotes said, "Would you know the secret of popularity? It is unconsciousness of self, altruistic interest, and inward kindliness, and outwardly expressed in good manners." So basically, in simpler terms, it's being kind and well mannered is the ultimate flex, y'all. And that is what I will teach you today. So very excited that y'all are here today at this presentation. Now, I do want to let everybody know, especially those who came into the chat or just came into our presentation, that this will be recorded. So please make sure that your cameras are off, mics are off, so we have a nice clean video to record and keep in our archives. And this video will be released to you probably like a couple days after this presentation is finished. So no worries there. And before we get started, I thought I'd just introduce myself. Hello, everybody. My name is Camille Mason. I'm Associate Director of Career Coaching here at USC Chapel Hill. I've been with Chapel Hill for, oh my God, it's been 10 years. Yay. And while I've been in this particular role, I've been here for about 2 years now, but I've been with the university for a very long time. Like I said, 10 years. And I've worked in the space of career services, career development, and I just love what I do. And as part of the work that I do, I have been certified as an etiquette dinner trainer. And so you are getting the information from someone who has gotten the information from the very guru who actually worked with Emily Post way back when. And it's unfortunate because she passed away recently. God bless her. And so I'm really proud to keep this information and keep the spirit of etiquette dinner going for her and all that she's already taught me. So thank you again for being here. Welcome. And I look forward to helping you guys out with this thing called etiquette dinner, right? So definitely don't want the meatball joint. So let's face it, etiquette might seem old-fashioned, but in today's business world, it's your secret weapon. What this is really about, in my opinion, is a sort of a mixture. Etiquette is really a mixture of confidence plus professionalism, right? So the thing that I see, the reason why etiquette is so important is it builds trust and rapport. It kind of sets you apart from the competitive market, and it helps you avoid just those embarrassing faux pas, which we'll get to when you're at the table during a meal. So just imagine you're in this high stakes dinner and the CEO of your dream company is sitting across from you. Are you cutting your spaghetti with a knife? Are you nervously drinking from their water glass? These small moments matter. So let's make sure that we know how to handle that, and let's really know how to nail this thing called etiquette. Right. So let's start with the golden rule of dining etiquette, right? People come first. Food comes second, y'all. Please remember that. If you don't walk away from anything of this presentation, this is the most important piece. Business meals aren't about stuffing your face. They're about building relationships, creating that trust, and leaving a lasting impression, right? So, how do you make people your priority? Well, first you want to engage with them. Look up from your plate, make contact, smile. Really listen. No one likes feeling ignored while you're deep in thought over your risotto, right? But second, put your phone away. Unless you're snapping a photo for like a Michelin star review, just kidding. We're not doing that, y'all. But stay off the screen and be present. And finally, pace yourself. Don't finish your plate in 2 minutes flat while everyone else is still on their soup. Eating too fast or too slow disrupts the natural flow of the conversation, kind of makes you stick out. We'll talk about all of that. Remember, no one will remember what you ordered for dessert, but they will remember how you made them feel at the table. And that's really what I want you guys to walk away with today is doing this, making this sort of muscle memory, but then focusing in on building that relationship at the table. So let's go ahead and jump right in and get started with the essentials of business dining to get us started. So, you guys, before we dive into the nitty-gritty, let's just talk about the variety of place settings you might encounter. So, we've got what we call the basic place setting. This is what you're going to get at your regular restaurant, your little hole in the wall spot or the little local place you go to. Is Chili's still around? Are all those restaurants still around? God, well, listen. Red Lobster didn't make it, but basically it's going to be like the same place setting here in your regular run of the mill, right? But then there's going to be what I also call the casual setting. It's perfect for dinner with friends, or like say you go over to a dinner party or something like that, or a casual business lunch. It adds just a few extra splatterings of a salad fork, a glass, a water glass, stuff like that. But we're not gonna worry so much about those two place settings because they're more casual. Tonight, we're tackling the formal place setting. This is the one that can make your head spin. And so many folks, so many forks, so many glasses, so many napkins, you just don't know what to do. The good news is it's not as intimidating as it looks. Let's break it down together. Now, let's zero in on the formal place setting because this setup can feel like a battlefield for you when you first walk up to the table. So it's simpler than it looks. So let's go ahead and break this all down. So first, what I want you guys to remember is a philosophy called the BMW. If you guys, I'm sure you guys remember that. So have you ever been to a formal dinner and tried and was trying to wonder like what to all the silverware, or have you inadvertently used someone else's glass? At a really nice dinner. The above picture can help you sort out what's what before that next important dinner. So BMW is one way to remember the placement of the bread, which tends to be on the left, right? The meal plate, which tends to be in the middle, and then the water glasses or wine glasses and the like to the right. So yes, this is where you realize you've probably been stealing your neighbor's bread basket for years, but now you know. And if you don't remember the BMW, I guess, way, another way to remember is this guy right here. And this is really useful if you have kids and all of that. You can use this way, makes it kind of fun for them, especially as they're learning their numbers and all that. So just remember that the bread plate and drinks, right? If you use your fingers to make the letter B and D with your hands, the B will always be on your left hand, indicating bread. And then of course, D is for drinks. That is to the right. So to me, this is a great way to remind yourself, okay, where is what and where are my place settings versus my neighbor's place settings? Because most tables you're kind of crowded together. So it looks like you're all together, but it's not. You got to kind of figure out where that delineation is. So next, utensils. They're set up in order in the way you're going to use them from the outside in. right? So let's kind of get a little bit more, we're going to get a little bit more in that when we move forward a little bit here. But I also want to go sort of in order, because typically when you sit down, you know, you've got your place setting, it's kind of telling you a story of what's going to happen at the meal. You kind of want to know where the line is, but there's a few other things you guys have to do before you actually sit and settle. So let's talk about that. So sometimes when you're in a big room with a lot of people, and if you find new people are coming in and coming to the table, it is a good idea for you to rise, even if you are seated, when someone new comes up and they start to introduce themselves. So you always want to smile and extend your hand. And you want to repeat this to all the individuals that are coming to the table, coming to the space. So once again, this is a great place to start using a firm handshake that only lasts 2 or 3 seconds. I'm sure many of you know how to do it, but just trying to remind you. And also to remember that both men and women should be ready to initiate the handshake. So it's not like we're waiting for someone to do it first. At least that's what Emily Post says now. We no longer have to do that. And no matter what you do, do not remove your jacket, right? Unless the host shows that they have removed their jacket, then you know you can feel safe to do the same thing. But in my opinion, it's just better not to remove it at all if you can avoid that. Next is the name tag. A lot of people get this wrong. I'm shocked, especially people who might be older. I go to events where I see a lot of older individuals and I am shocked. They still don't know this. But your name tag needs to be placed on a certain direction, right? So your name tag should be placed on the right-hand side of your front shoulder area. Why? It's because when you shake hands, the natural progression of your eye goes up. And then any like swag or lapel pins like I have on today, they always go on the left. And even the reason why all of this even happens, if you kind of want to know why this rule even exists, is really from the military. So all military swag tends to go on the left. And so we said, oh, the right is free. We'll put the name tag there. And it all kind of fell into place and made sense. The next thing you want to remember is the napkin. That's right. And the napkin's going to have a journey. We'll talk about that. But it is considered acceptable for both men and women to make sure that they place the napkin in the lap. And usually there's two ways to figure out when you want to place the napkin in the lap. There's always going to be a host of some sort at the table. We'll talk about this in a minute. That particular person that is your host, when they put their napkin on the lap, you can go ahead and put yours. You almost want to, almost like an orchestra. We're waiting for the cue from the maestro, who is our host. And when that host sits down, puts the napkin on their lap or takes their blazer off or whatever, we can finally relax and mimic the same information. Now, if you're in a big crowd, like say a very long table, there's a lot of people or several tables in one room, then a good rule of thumb is just to go ahead and put the napkin on the lap. The thing you want to remember about this napkin situation is you want to make sure that it is folded, right? And then you place the fold on the crease of your lap. That's really the ideal way to put the napkin on your lap. So it doesn't belong in your shirt. It doesn't belong tucked into your belt loops. None of that weirdness. Just keep it simple and keep it classy, everybody. So again, let's go back to this idea of a host. So at a single table that's led by someone who is the host, you want to wait for the host signal to start the dinner. And usually the host, just think about it from the standpoint of like a dinner party, that when the host is mingling, you come in, you're saying your hellos, all of that. And as soon as the host is ready for to sit down and start eating, they'll announce it, they'll sit down, and they'll start talking about what's on the menu, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the same happens in that dinner. So let's say you're in a professional presentation. What you want to do here is you're going to wait until that employer is taking you to the restaurant. You guys end up sitting down and you follow that person's lead, right? So they are at least going to be the host. If there is no host, it's once the whole entire group is served. But better to be late than early. So just wait for a second, suss the room out, see what's going on, and then you want to follow suit once somebody sort of begins. So now let's go back to this place setting idea here. So one of the things that I like about having the place setting out in front of you before you early is it gives you an idea of what is going to be served, which meal is going to be served, and how many servings you're going to have. So all the utensils that you're going to use for all of your courses should be laid out. There's no utensils that they will need to bring out to you unless you drop a fork or a knife or a spoon or something like that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But with this particular place setting, you can automatically see that there is going to be a soup course because there's a soup bowl. There's going to be a salad course with bread because the smaller fork is meant for the salad. And sometimes they'll even have seafood. And if they have seafood, it'll be a very tiny fork with 3 prongs. So you can count the prongs. 4 prongs is food, 3 prongs is always seafood, right? And then you're always going to see the big table, the big plate. Sometimes it has a charger on it, basically like a glorified placemat. You can see it, and that's what a charger is. And then you're going to see that there's a little dessert spoon. So we already know there is going to be a dessert course. Now, you'll also see a red and a wine glass and a water glass always on the corner. So you, as the person who's eating, will have to decide which wine you want if you decide you're going to have wine. So you can already kind of get in your mind, okay, I'm going to have to pick which wine I want. Now, good dinners will already tell you which wine to use. But in this particular case, sometimes people have more of affinity for one or the other. And so you get that choice, which is really nice. And always remember that no matter what, you're going to always start from the outermost corner and work your way in. So at least rest assured you never have to pull from the middle. You're always going to pull from the outside. So that's a fun little tip. So it should make you feel at least a little bit, a little bit better. So we can already tell that the soup spoon is going to be the first to be served because it is outside, right? It's the outermost item. And typically soup is the first course. Sometimes it's going to be salad, right? And so if that were so, probably the soup will be last. In some cases, in some countries, they put that soup last. But in this particular case, because it's on the outside, we know soup is going to be the first to be served. So once you finish your soup course, where you're only going to need your soup spoon and bowl, that will be taken away. And what will be left over will be your dinner knife and then your salad fork, right? And so you know already, some people, they like to eat their salad with the knife. We'll talk about that in a minute. And so we automatically know that's the next course. If the salad is going to be, in some countries, sometimes the salad is like part of the last course, then you'll see the salad fork inside and you'll have the dinner fork on the outside, right? So as long as you remember, the smaller fork is actually for salad, the larger one is for your actual meal. Anyway, in this example, you will find that now that the soup is done, now we're ready for that salad course. And once we're done with that, what will be left over is the dinner fork and the dinner knife. When this is left over, we know that we're coming to the end of our meal. This will be our last, the second to the last portion of our meal. And when that happens, once that main course is cleared and the bread and everything will go, what will be left over will be that dessert spoon. Usually people will bring in the dessert for you. Sometimes people are lactose intolerant and things like that. So sometimes you'll either be asked which dessert you like, the gluten-free one or the regular, right? Or either you'll be asked at that moment, but either way, they've left the spoon for you and then they'll give you the right dessert based off of your dietary needs. So that's typically what ends up happening. So now that you kind of get an idea of what meal is going to be served, what is going to happen, after this serving is done and this serving. Now I just want to talk a little bit about the faux pas that tend to happen at the table when we are having these dinners, which I want to make sure you guys avoid. So let's learn how to eat like a pro, and basically no chewing voices, no chewing stuff allowed here. So let's start with posture alone, because sometimes this is another faux pas I tend to find. It is a good idea to stay straight and upright, right, with your both feet on the floor. You may, of course, cross your ankles, especially ladies, if you have a dress or a skirt on. I understand that, but making sure you're not slouching. And another reason why you don't want to do that is because if you're already hunched over, what tends to happen is you'll want to bring your mouth to the food. And I don't want you to do that, right? So, at least in this case, it helps you to stay upright and stay eating without hunching over the food to get to it. The next issue, which a lot of people hate, but I know it almost makes you not want to eat the bread, right? But there is a protocol to how we eat the bread. So unfortunately, we don't take the roll and bring it on our plate and start stuffing it or dredging it through the gravy or whatever. We don't do any of that. What typically tends to happen is you're going to grab a roll, you're going to put it on your bread plate, and then you're going to break off a tiny piece. And then you're going to use your knife, the butter knife that's already on the butter plate, and you're going to take a little bit of butter and scrape it on the edge of the plate and use it to just butter a tiny piece of the bread. And then you can put that in your mouth. So you're taking small bites, you're doing little butter pats by the bite. So you're not like slathering on the whole thing and then like going for it and taking a bite out of it. So unfortunately, it makes the process of eating bread much, much slower, which might be a good thing, right, for our waistline. But it also means that you're there to just eat the bread with the butter. You're not there to use it as another utensil to grab up some gravy, is all I'm saying. All right, so now let's go to this pesky little soup. So there are two kinds of soups that tend to be served. You've got hot soups, you've got cold soups. When you have a hot soup, you do not want to blow on the soup to cool it off. It is a big, huge faux pas. We don't do that. When you're eating the soup, you want to make sure that you are pushing the spoon away from you. And what this does is it prevents any drips happening on the front of your outfit, but also it gives you a chance to scrape whatever little bit of soup is left or have poured over your soup. It gives you the chance to scrape it off and then bring it to your mouth. So that's why doing it in this manner, it's going to be a lot cleaner and it'll prevent a lot of like accidents and mess. The only other thing to be mindful of is that in Europe, they serve their soups in a bowl with two handles on the side. Only then, if you see that kind of a bowl, only then do you grab both of those handles and put it up to your mouth. Usually, soups that are in one of those handled bowls is always going to be some kind of consomme, some kind of really, really soupy soup. So there shouldn't be anything solid or floating around in there. So that gives you a little ease right there, that you'll be able to eat it without getting anything over you or needing a spoon to get to the actual items in the soup, right? So again, once this is all taken away, because of the way soup bowls are made, it's very clean, so you shouldn't get anything on your dinner plate or your charger. That's kind of why this way of eating soup is so popular. Now, as far as the salad course, typically at a very good restaurant, the salad pieces are already cut up in manageable chunks. So you don't have to worry about cutting it up. Now, if you find that you have to cut it up, I'm just saying that's not the best restaurant ever. I'm just saying after all the stuff that I've seen and places I've eaten, if it comes with these big hunks of lettuce, then more than likely not the best restaurant ever. Just saying. But if you need to, you can use that knife. And then, of course, your waiter or waitress will see that and will give you a new knife for your dinner course. So anyway, if you do see that, you can cut it up into bite-sized pieces, making sure that these items don't fall off the plate while you're doing it. And of course, making sure that you're not dredging, right, this salad and gravy or anything weird like that. You just want to eat it the way it comes, and not do too much extra salting and or asking for extra dressing either. Usually these things already come pre-dressed for you. All right, some other things to remember here. Ordering refreshments. It's a sticky subject. Uh, Water, juice, iced tea is typically what is the most acceptable. Now, in cases where the host is offering a drink of some sort or a spirit, you always want to go with wine. You never turn your wine glass over trying to indicate, no, I don't want any, or, I don't drink wine or whatever. All you have to do is just place your hand over your glass, and that will let the wait staff know that you don't want any wine or you are done with drinking the wine for the night. There's definitely coffee and tea that is given at the meal. It's usually at the end of the meal. And when that happens, you want to make sure that you're not making a huge mess of having like 5 sugar packets, right? Because you want to keep the table as clean and inconspicuous of trash as possible. So if you do put sugar in your tea or whatever, when you do, you want to fold up the sugar packets to as small and as tight as you possibly can, and you want to hide it underneath the charger so that it's almost disappears. The wait staff know to pick that up, when you are done with the meal. They'll take the charger away, they'll see the trash, and they'll sweep it away. Now let's talk about this thing called spirits and wine. I'm not a fan of drinking liqueur of any sort at any event, especially at a work event. But I have had 2 or 3 incidences in my life where they have been very insistent that we should. And actually, in many of the events at MBA UNC, we do offer spirits at events. So for that reason, yes, those are okay. But at an interview or a really important meeting with somebody like a client, it's probably not a good idea to do it unless the person that's the host at the head of the table orders one. If they do, and you don't want them to drink alone, I would only ask that you drink no more than 1 glass of wine. And I mean, I want you to nurse that wine. Don't chug it. And then, of course, someone's going to look over and say, oh, you want another? Don't do it. Take small sips. I mean, if you nurse that 1 glass of wine all night, that's fine. That's exactly what I want. Now, in Europe, different story. They like to drink with their food. And so use your discretion. Again, I would still nurse the 1 glass. If you are having a meal in a European restaurant with a European company, they have different rules for liqueur. They drink liquor with every single meal and free abandon. So it is up to you, but I still think you should always keep your wits about you and only do 1 glass and nurse that 1 glass that whole night. If you are in a scenario where you have to order your meal and the food isn't already pre-done, there isn't a pre-menu done for you, I say go with simple foods that are easy to eat. So nothing that's going to be salty, soupy, spaghetti, anything you got to use with your hands. Just anything that can be just really, really messy is something that I would try to avoid. I also don't think you should order the most expensive thing you see. So no surf and turf, no lamb chops and whatnot. Keep it simple and keep it to something that isn't going to be taxing or very expensive or elaborate, right? All right, so now let's talk about the adventure of the napkin. So a couple things to remember with this napkin. Uh, if you find that you have soiled the napkin, you have to be aware of where the soiling is. And when you fold it on and put it on your lap, so you're dabbing your mouth and you want to put it back on your lap, you want to make sure that you're folding the napkin over to the clean side and keeping the dirty soiled part on the inside. When you find that you want to leave the table to go to the restroom or take a call or whatever you need, you always want to put that napkin right on the left-hand side, and it lets the wait staff know you're coming back, right? Now, a long time ago, people used to put it on the back of the chair or at the bottom of the chair and all this. But what would happen is that the soilage would either soil the table linens, would soil the chair, things like that. So now we put it to the side of the table, side of the plate, to indicate that we're coming back. It's just a second. And in that case, you make sure that you don't put the soil side up. Try to fold it to hide it, right? And put it to the side. So that's the napkin adventure. I know it's a lot. Another adventure that's hard to do is the serving and passing of the food. Now, not all the time will you be at a meal where people are all together and we're passing all this food around, not typically. But when that happens, plates are actually served on the left and removed from your right. You'll see that when you go to like Carolina Inn, if you guys are here in this area, or the Alumni Center, and you go to a really nice dinner, that kind of thing. You'll see that process happening there. So the person closest to the plate, if you're trying to get like the mashed potatoes or the peas or whatever, the person closest to the plate should offer to the person on the left first, right? And then they pass the food to the right. I know that's very weird. It feels odd to do that. And that's why I wish we could do this with food in an actual setting so that you can practice, because it is something that you have to get muscle memory, because your first instinct will be, oh, you want the potatoes? Here you go. And you can't do that. You've got to take a moment to give it to your neighbor and then you pass it over, right? You never want to use your own utensil to serve food out of the communal dish ever. There will be already a utensil inside of it. If someone wants to salt the meal, which we're going to talk about that, then you have to bring the salt and the pepper together. So the way to remember that is the salt and the pepper are married. They are not divorced. Wherever salt goes, pepper goes. Wherever pepper goes, salt goes. So that way you never, ever, ever leave one at the table. They always come together, even if somebody just wants one of them. All right, so we got that down. Now let's get to the honorable mentions here. So I talked about not blowing on the food. Also, another thing to remember is don't season the food right away. At least taste it before you start seasoning. And another thing to remember that is in many European countries, so we're talking France, oh, they hate it. They just hate it. France, Switzerland, who else does this? Not in Germany, they're fine. But if you go in and you start salting their food, even if you taste it and you don't like it, oh my goodness. Nasty work. Don't do it. He will be the chef will be very upset with you. Will probably come out and ask, like, is there something wrong with the food? What's happening? You want me to redo the food, the meal? So to just avoid that whole faux pas, that whole production, just eat the food the way it comes if you are in a European country, right? So try not to complain about the food, all of that. Take small bites, no big cheek bulging, cheeks full of food. That's gross. Don't mix your food, mashing it together, like, oh, I like my meat with the mashed potatoes. None of that. Keep it separate. No talking with your mouth full, chewing with your mouth full. If you dislike an item, you can't eat it, don't want to eat it, just kind of move it around a little bit on your plate, make you look like you kind of did something there. But again, you don't have to eat it all. Great story for MBA at UNC. We went to a summit. This was in Poland. Poland definitely has some really good food, no doubt, but they also like dishes that taste like aspic. If y'all are familiar with aspic, it's meat jello. And it's exactly what it sounds like. And so what happens is in this meat jello, they put cold pieces of meat in there too. I'm trying to keep the bile down because I but I couldn't finish it all. but they were so proud of that aspect, and it's been forever since I had it, and it was rough. It was rough going down, but it's just what you got to do sometimes when you are in events where you are trying to impress people or not make them feel bad. So if you dislike something, just move it around a little bit, give it a try, move it around, but don't like push your plate away, say I don't want it anymore, right? All right. And then, of course, if you have a piece of inedible piece of food, like a bone, a stem, anything like that, you can politely remove it, right, with like your utensil, and then try to hide it so that it's not at least glaring on your plate or underneath your plate or whatever. But anyway, the idea here is don't spit it out. Don't spit it out on your napkin. All right. So now let's talk a little bit about the ways that and styles that you can eat your food. So there's the American style and then there's the continental style. So let's talk a little bit about the American style. The American style is probably exactly the way you guys are used to eating. You put your fork and knife as pictured. You cut with the knife into small pieces, and then you switch your hand, the fork back to the other hand, your dominant hand, which typically is the right hand, and you start to eat your food, which this takes a little bit more time, a little bit of switching and back and forth. Then you have the continental style. Again, you're holding it the same way from the beginning when you are actually cutting your food, but instead you keep the fork and the knife in the same hand. That way you don't have to do any switching and you can just eat with the tines down pointing towards your mouth. And this is the way typically European folks will eat their food versus the American style where we're switching our hands. So try to decide which style, try each style on your own, and then figure out which one really works for you. I tend to eat American style normally with my friends and family and whatnot. And then I will, when I'm in more of a formal settings, I will eat continental style because it's just easier and I don't like all that switching, is usually what I tend to do. All right, so when do we end this thing called the meal? So, of course, just like you said, the host will probably end the meal, kind of indicate this is the last course and that, people will start to disperse from the table slightly. But when finished, there's a couple ways. If you are eating American style, you can leave your items in this manner, like you see at the top. If you're eating in continental style or either style, all you have to do is just put your knife and your fork together and place it at that 4 o'clock position, and that will let wait staff know that you are absolutely finished with your meal, which is really great. All right. So now we're going to switch gears. Now that we learned a little bit about the etiquette, what to do at the table, how to comport ourselves around the table, now I kind of want to switch gears to just talk about the networking piece. How do we do this professional network over food, keeping people engaged, being funny, fun, engaging, and all the things? This can be hard to do, I know. So I got a couple tips and tricks to help you guys out here with this process. So let's jump right in. So, mingling can feel like navigating a minefield here. What do you say? When do you jump in? How do you gracefully escape a never ending conversation? Relax. Mingling is about making connections, not proving you're the most interesting person in the room. Start with a confident introduction. Smile, make eye contact, offer a firm handshake right before the food comes out, letting people know you're excited to get to know them, meet them, spend the next hour or two breaking bread with them, right? Bonus points if you say their name back to them when they introduce themselves. It helps you to also remember and makes them feel valued. A lot of theorists say that it's kind of a subconscious thing, people will really start to take a liking to you if you say their name at least 3 times throughout the whole entire conversation. So if you can remember that, to say their names whenever you can or slip that in there, they'll start to see you as somebody that they like. That is what studies have shown. So when joining a conversation, I would say don't just dive in like you're cannonballing it, right? Instead, observe the flow, listen to what's being said, contribute when you have something relevant to add. Keep the conversation light. Save all of that weird political debates and deep existential musings for maybe other events that you might be with folks that you're a little bit more casual with. But travel, food, shared professional interest are always safe bets, always great conversation pieces. And when it's time to move on, don't just like leave people or stop the conversation and turn around to the next person. Just politely excuse yourself by saying something like, "It's been great chatting with you. I'm going to take a couple minutes to talk to my neighbor here, make sure they don't feel, left out of this conversation." And what this does is it keeps the interaction positive and professional. Now, here's a pro tip. When dining in a group, you're responsible for the people in your what I call conversation triangle. So think of it like your personal social zone of responsibility. The triangle includes the person directly across from you, the two people seated on your left and your right. So, why does this matter? Well, it's because nobody likes being left out of a conversation. Or worse, stuck listening to somebody talking in some long monologue about their cat's dietary habits. No. When you engage your triangle, you help create a balanced and inclusive atmosphere where everyone feels a part of the group. Now, how do you manage your triangle? You start by rotating your attention. So, chat with the person across from you for a few minutes, then turn to the left, and later turn to the right. And when you're chatting, don't dominate the conversation. This isn't your TED Talk debut. No, it's a chance to really connect with people first. And one more thing, try to be inclusive. If you notice someone in your triangle isn't saying much, invite them in. A simple like, "Oh, James, what do you think about this?" Or, "Have you ever encountered anything like that before?" Get them involved, make them feel like you notice them and you value them. And it will really go a long way. So by mastering your triangle, you'll be seen as warm, engaging, professional, and basically the dining companion everybody wants to sit next to. So let's talk about a superpower for conversation. And this is my theory called the thread theory. This is your secret weapon for never running out of things to talk about. Think of conversations like weaving a tapestry, a beautiful, lovely tapestry. Each thread represents a connection, whether it's a shared person, a shared experience, or a shared interest. The more threads you find, the richer and more engaging the conversation becomes. And bonus points, the more ridiculously likable you'll actually seem. So, how do you find these threads? Let me break it down for you. So let's first start with people. If you have mutual contacts, use them. Start by asking, "How do you know XYZ person?" If you don't know anyone in common, don't panic, y'all. Ask them about their network or their industry. You'd be surprised how quickly you can discover a connection. Think of it as the 6 degrees of separation, Kevin Bacon example, but for networking. This is exactly what you'll tend to find. You'll find something or someone you guys know really well. The second thread is context. So let's say you're convinced you have nothing in common. Here's your hack. Focus on the context. Maybe you're both attending the same conference or you both use LinkedIn. Ask, "What brought you here today?" Or, "Have you attended this event before?" Context is an easy thread to pull, and who knows, you might unravel a really amazing story. And finally, our interest. This is the gold standard of threads. If you can get this one, you've nailed it. Shared interests lead to the best conversations because you're both naturally passionate about the topic. Maybe it's a hobby, maybe it's love of travel or fascination with AI, whatever. Drop hints about your interests, ask about theirs. Before you know it, you're bonding over your favorite Netflix show or that time you both accidentally ate the spiciest food ever. The beauty of the thread theory is that it turns even the most awkward small talk into genuine connection. Just remember, every thread you find strengthens the tapestry of your relationship. So now we learned a little bit about the thread theory. Now I want to make sure that you can keep the conversation going and not drop the ball and be awkward. So let's talk about another theory that I have. So let's find a thread to the next level. So it's not enough to spot a connection. You've got to dig a little deeper. And this is where my technique called the five whys come in really well. So when someone shares something about themselves, don't just nod politely and move on. Instead, ask them why it's important to them. Then ask why again, and then again. The idea is I want you to peel back the layers of that person and really get to know the person until you start to see what I call is the spark, meaning they really get into telling you about them, their story, and all of that. So let me show you an example, and I'll use moi, myself, for this one, right? So let's say I introduce myself to you. You're a part of my little triangle, right? And I say something like, hi, my name's Camille Mason. I'm from Wisconsin. I work at UNC Chapel Hill, Associate Director, Career Coaching for Keenan Flagler. I help professionals find their calling. I love what I do, right? So if you want to use that five whys, right, then your question to me might be something like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. So why did you choose career coaching? To which I might say, well, because I love helping people figure out what they're passionate about and what makes them tick. And then you could come back with another question and ask, well, why is that so important to you to find what makes somebody tick? What does that matter? To which I would say, because I didn't have that kind of guidance early in my career. And because of that, I wanted others to feel empowered, just like I do today. And then they might even go on and ask even more questions and might say, wow, why do you feel that empowering someone is so meaningful? Like, I'm loving your vibe. Like, how did you get to this? And I would say, because I've seen how it can transform someone's life. It's like watching someone light up when they realize their potential. And at this point, I'm off to the races because I'm giving you all the information, all the research I've learned, et cetera, et cetera, but you're making me light up. So you're pulling at the threads to finally get to the light of me and what really turns me on and gets me going and gets me deep in the conversation where I might even forget other people are around because we don't want to do that, but because the conversation is just so impelling. But do you see how this works? You're not interrogating, you're showing genuine curiosity. By the time you hit the third, fourth, or the fifth why, you've already uncovered are meaningful and deeply personal to that person. And let me tell you, people love talking about what matters to them. They love talking about themselves. So let them get comfortable in that space with you. And the best part is, guys, the more you learn, the more threads you find to build on, and the more memorable you become in their eyes. When you're done with that meal, if you have the chance to remember, if you go and use your cell phone to write down some notes about that person. That way, when you go home, you can connect with them on LinkedIn and bring up something about that conversation that you had with them at the table. And oof, boy, they will absolutely love you if you could do that. All right, so as we wrap up tonight, let me bring us back to the most important takeaway. Once again, this is about the people, not the food. Sure, the lobster bisque might be amazing, but you're not here for the bisque. You're here to build relationships, make connections, and leave a lasting impression. Remember, the goal of any event isn't to see how many courses you can get through without spilling something. It's to engage, to listen, and to show up as your most professional and authentic self. So, what does that mean for you? Well, it means being present. It means focusing on your triangle, engaging the people across from you, to the left, to the right. It means finding those threads of connection and weaving them into meaningful conversations. And most importantly, it means letting go of perfection. You don't need to be the etiquette expert of the century. A smile, a warm handshake, a genuine interest in others will get you further than knowing which fork to use for your salad. As you head into your next big event, dinner, or networking event, remember this: the food is the backdrop, the people are the main course. Focus on them, and you'll always leave the table a success. All right, you guys. So before we go, I want to I never leave you with anything. I always give you some kind of trinket. So I am actually going to be sending you a little dining etiquette cheat sheet. It's a little bit of workbook that I've created for you guys. I will email it to you. If you signed up for this presentation, I will send it to you. So fear not, I'll get it all together for you. But the purpose is to give you like a quick guide you could probably bring with you, put in your pocket with all the little tips and tricks that we talked about today that you might forget while you're at the table. So want to make sure it's a little cheat sheet you can use if you start to feel like you're freaking out because there's just too much to remember. So take that little guide with you. And again, I want to tell you guys thank you so much. My name is Camille Mason, Associate Director of Career Coaching. It was so fun to talk to you guys today about this thing called etiquette. And with that, I look forward to helping you guys be the best professionals at the dinner table as you can be. Thanks.